I think so. In the interest of time, we should
Yep,
probably begin. I see we have a number of participants.
yep. Okay, so good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's session with Northwell Health. My name is Colin Allen. I'm the Director of Communications and Events here at the Council, and I bring greetings to you this morning on behalf of our President and CEO, Mr. Terrence Clark, who could not be here today because he is attending another important meeting. I'm joined by my colleagues here today from the Council and also some of our colleagues from Northwell Health. We hope that this session is informative. I know we've got quite a few people on here. We're very excited about that. I just want to drop a few ground rules for you. One, this meeting is being recorded, so please be mindful of that. Two, if you're not speaking at the point in time, we ask that you mute your microphones. That helps with the audible experience for everyone else. If you're not speaking or you don't have a question at the point in time, we also ask that you turn your camera off because that helps to manage bandwidth. We will, if necessary, share this presentation afterwards if we have permission to do so. And the recording will also be available on our YouTube channel. As the marketing guy, I have to put a shameless plug in that you follow us on all of our social media channels. But I also hope that you're signed up for our newsletter because we have important information going out all the time, twice a week, to our MBEs and other MBEs alike. So without further ado, thank you again for being here, and I'll turn it over now to Dawn Wells, who's the Assistant Vice President at Northwell, and she'll be the moderator for today's session and should carry you through. Dawn, it's all yours.
Thank you, Colin, and thank you everyone for joining this morning. We're so excited to present our procurement team, members of our procurement team, as well as our supplier diversity initiatives. And we'll get into a conversation about sustainability as well. So can you guys go to the next slide? So I'll briefly just introduce some of the members of the team, but you guys will meet with them soon. Today we have from our supply chain team at Northwell Health, Jessica Ulfi, who's a VP of Supply Chain, Greg Lowe, AVP of Supply Chain, myself. Joe Greco will be joining us. He's a Senior Director, Category Management. Al DeFranco, a Director in Supply Chain, and Amber Patino, a Sustainability Program Manager. So just to give us some background about supplier diversity at Northwell Health, we formalized our supplier diversity program in 2010. Our program is inclusive of both local and small businesses. And to date, we've engaged with and currently engaged with over 2,000 diverse and small businesses. In 2022, we spent over $320 million with diverse suppliers. And we've been able to meet many of our goals by having strategic partnerships with our prime suppliers. And you'll hear us speak about that a little later on in the presentation. We work directly with many of the certifying agencies, MSDC, WeBank, and others to host and participate in networking and educational events such as what we're doing today. And we partner with other advocacy agencies like Ascend Long Island and such. When we began this journey, and I was very lucky to begin this journey with Northwell Health, we had a mission in mind to make sure that we are engaging with businesses in the communities in which we serve. And we think that it's important because we know that there is a tie to social and health equity in terms of the dollars that we spend in the communities. So as an organization, today we have a goal of 10% of total spend, procurement spend with minority-owned businesses. We are working towards that goal. And I'm just happy to be a part of this initiative. I think it's really important, and it's one of our main priorities of our CSR goals. So what we're going to do today is we're going to meet with some of our category managers as well as our sustainability expert to let you guys know how you can engage with Northwell, the things that we're looking for in the businesses that we work with. and a little bit more as well about the process of becoming a vendor. And I'm going to give it over to Jessica Olfie, our VP of Supply Chain, just to give you some background on Northwell Health as an organization and our supply chain operations. So you can go to the next slide.
Good morning, everyone. Very excited to be here as well. I'm going to stay off camera because I'm having bandwidth issues to begin with, but I am a long-term dedicated employee of the supply chain at Northwell, and also been extremely fortunate to be a part of its development and the essential role and transformation really over the past 20 years. We are the largest healthcare provider in New York State. We're 21 hospitals strong, 850 outpatient facilities, and growing. We often talk about ourselves as a little city, or as not even a little city, but anything that you can think of, really, our business may have a need for in order to further Northwell's transactions. So and you'll hear from a lot of the experts and the category management specialists today, but it's really anything from IT to consulting to typical medical, surgical products to the non-typical. And we've created a framework also that allows us to help really the community outside of Northwell. We created a group purchasing organization, and we work with all different types of vendors and suppliers. And throughout the pandemic, the framework was really key and enabled us to help small businesses really that never had to think about worrying about PPE before. So they were able to leverage our framework really to get the supplies that they needed, when they needed it. So, my experience is in sourcing and contract negotiations, in the development of the GPO. Really, I also co-chair Northwell's Greenberg, which is a business employee resource group that's made up of employees that are dedicated to protecting our planet and advancing socially responsible initiatives. Northwell is really focused on excellence and equity in care, and driving diversity throughout care, throughout our community partnerships, and really making sure that the vendors and suppliers that we do business with reflect our team members and the patients that we care for. We have thousands of contracts at any given time, and we have thousands of suppliers that we work with. And so we're really looking forward to speaking with you today and telling you more about how to engage with an organization such as Northwell. So I'm definitely excited to be here and talk to everyone. And I think I hand it off back to you, Dawn, or to our first panelist.
I'll take it really quickly and I'll hand it off to the first panelist. So I just wanted to also just give some guidelines for the discussion today before we hand it over. Again, we are here to discuss how you guys can do business with Northwell, and also the connection between supplier diversity, sustainability, and how that impacts the communities in which we serve. I will hand it off to our first category manager. He will give you a background of the category that he manages and the things that they purchase, what they buy, who they buy it from, etc. And we will have somewhat of a panel discussion where they will also have the opportunity to ask questions that will be posed by the moderator. And then at the end of the session, we will have a Q&A portion. So please save your questions. You can put them in the chat, or we should have some time for a live discussion at the end. So without further ado, I'll give it off to Joe Greco. Again, he is a senior director, supply chain, and he has a team that manages our laboratory procurement. So Joe, take it away.
Excuse me. Good morning, everyone. Dawn, thank you for inviting me to be a part of this. I appreciate it, and I'm looking forward to the discussion and explaining kind of what how the lab operates, and maybe how some of the vendors here could support the lab. So just a couple of high level points about the lab and Northwell's laboratory operations. The lab it's comprised of essentially a core central lab, which processes roughly anywhere to 25 to 30 different samples a day. Now that's just the samples, and each sample might have, at least one, maybe two or three different tests that run from it. So the number of reportables on any given day, we're looking at somewhere about 50 to 60,000 reportables a day. Why that's important is because, and how it ties into the supplier kind of review and management and selection, let's say, is you can't make up if there's a failure to supply, you kind of can't dig yourself out of that hole. An operating room goes down, you can kind of make it up over the week, let's say, but we don't have the equipment to shut the lab down for a day. And then on top of that, there's the individual hospital laboratories. And those laboratories essentially support the individual hospital in which they sit. You can't, by law, you can't have an emergency room open without a laboratory that can run some critical tests, let's say troponin, if they think there's a cardiac event. So those laboratories are essential as well. They must operate, and it's a 24/7 operation, every day of the year. On top of it, the laboratory, I think, might be unique in this sense within Northwell procurement, or Northwell in general, where we have a joint venture with the hospitals that comprise New York City Health and Hospitals. So that's roughly 13 individual hospitals and hospital labs. We act as their core lab where non-critical samples go as well. So our volume is made up of more than just the Northwell hospitals. So that's quite large number of hospitals, roughly 30 something, plus the core lab that a vendor has to support. In addition to that, there's also the physician sites, which I'm sure most people are aware of. Go to the physician and they draw a sample there. That tube ultimately ends back up at the core lab, but the core lab operations also supply those collection devices, blood tubes, and what have you to those physician practices. And then just as a quick little note, some of the supply chain issues that we faced during COVID and still extending, beyond it, the initial pandemic, let's call it, are related to raw materials, plastics and just about everything. And production issues with, factory workers becoming ill and not being able to just produce the quantities that we need. Northwell has been, maybe a victim of its own success, in the extent that, when product was allocated, a certain manufacturer could only make so much, and they'd have to kind of spread it around amongst all their customers. Northwell probably didn't get its fair share or the lion's share of the product. So it made operations difficult at times. And also with the laboratory, it's not something you could pivot on. It's not, you can't really compare it to a bedpan where, there's not, the preferred one's not being made, but you could get an alternative. It's kind of an easy swap. With the laboratory, all the equipment's hooked up to the system. The test orders go through, the results go through. So it's not as easy as swapping takes months. It's not a day transaction, or it's a much longer lead time to switch product. So that's a brief overview on the laboratory operations and kind of what we manage from procurement. In addition, I review a majority of the contracts. So, the general terms and conditions and the supplier's obligations. Let's say we'll call them commitments. If we're committing to a certain dollar spend, well, then in return, we expect the vendor to commit to being able to supply that spend. And if the vendor is struggling to supply it, there's a penalty in there, or some sort of remedy to address the issue spelled out ahead of time. That way everyone knows kind of what they're getting into at the outset. I'm sorry, Dawn, is there, or I know you said to hold questions later on, but is there anything specific? I have a question. Is there anything specific in addition to that you want me to address, or?
So Joe, I get this question often, right? Oftentimes I'm posed with how a supplier can sort of break into this market, and understanding my experience here and what I do in supply chain and yours, and then also, just given the size of our organization, we have this shared services supply chain. How do you engage with suppliers given just standardization across the organization? How does that impact basically your vendor, your selection of vendors?
Okay, no, that's I would imagine that's a commonly asked question. So when it comes to laboratory vendor selection, the first criteria that the lab and that we look at is just the quality of the vendor's test, right? Is it the best test on the market? Does it, is it going to really tell us when to treat or tell the physician when to treat and when not to treat, if that's the kind of test that it's running? Most of them are. Let's say, that there's might be some tests that don't necessarily impact treatment directly, but in general, the question is, most vendors have, they'll give you the outliers, whether someone's either high or low in a specific area. But when it's the question of whether or not you get the cholesterol pill or the insulin injection, it's usually a matter of a degree on the results. So we want to go with the most specific test on the market, generally speaking. Price is always a factor. And then also, and I kind of alluded to it earlier, it's the ability to serve not only Northwell, but a majority of our contracts are involved in New York City Health and hospitals. And do you have the ability to serve them as well? So where we see this the most and where we've actually had some real failures is in the servicing of the equipment. So now if remember an instrument, we can't not perform a test. So, everybody's car has a spare tire. So every lab has extra equipment for whatever specific test it is. But sometimes everything goes down, or sometimes it might be a reagent issue. And does the vendor have the ability to have enough field service technicians available in our area, in the area we serve, which goes, basically out to Riverhead out east and up into Westchester County, I guess in upstate New York, you'd call it. Are they able to serve those areas in a reasonable amount of time? So those are pretty much the in addition to price, which I think I said, are the main areas that we look at.
All right, and then I have one question from the chat, and I think I know the answer, but I'll let you answer. Are you sourcing just for the clinical labs or research labs, or both?
Both. Great question, and the answer is both.
Okay, thanks, Joe. So we're going to go to our next presenter. And the next slide. And
sorry, I hate to interrupt, but are we supposed to be putting questions in the chat or in Q&A?
You can put them in either in the
All
chat
right.
or in the Q&A. The Q&A
I
is
said
being
both,
managed.
but I don't think it was noticed, so I just wanted to see if you could address that question, please.
Yeah, and we'll be addressing questions closer to the end. So thanks. Go ahead, Don.
Okay, so we can go to the next slide, and we're going to speak to Greg Lowe, who's an AVP supply chain, and his team, amongst other things, manages the procurement of facilities and engineering.
Thanks, Dawn, and thanks for inviting me this morning, and good morning, everyone. Very quick introduction, Greg Lowe, AVP Supply Chain with Northwell Health. I've been with the organization for just shy of 13 years at this point, and just prior to coming onto Northwell Health. I actually worked for Lenox Hill Hospital in the city just prior to the acquisition of Lenox Hill Hospital by the health system. I've been involved and responsible for facilities and engineering related supply chain and procurement activities for, say, about 5 years at this point. As far as my role with facilities and engineering, it is classic, supply chain management and procurement and contracting. Managing all of the transactions that are going back and forth through our vendor population within the facilities and engineering space. The vendor contracts we have at this point in excess of 800 contracts across the enterprise, and that's just within facilities and engineering. Many vendors making up those 800 contracts. But within the actual transactions themselves, we can say that it's a combination of purchase services, which maintenance and repairs, just the standard maintenance and repairs that are required, day in and day out by the facilities to make sure their buildings are running properly, and also standing service contracts. So preventative maintenance on our elevators or preventative maintenance on a pneumatic tube system. Our fire systems. And on the bottom right corner here, I have a list of probably not fully comprehensive, but a list of a lot of the categories that within facilities and engineering we're managing. So purchase services on an annual basis, and this number continues to grow every year as the health system continues to grow, is about $65 million. Supplies, in the context of facilities and engineering, talking about MRO supplies, building supplies, building materials that are used for internal projects and refreshes and renovations and all that stuff. And also capital expenditures, capital projects. It could be buying a new split HVAC system, or it could be putting in a new air handler, an elevator modernization, and then more major projects, whether we're renovating or refreshing a practice or an entire unit within a hospital, building a new unit within a hospital, so that there's a lot of projects going on all across the health system at any given time. Something that's, I would say, pretty exciting for the health system and especially the folks that are involved in facilities and engineering is there's been a pretty significant dollar amount that's been allocated towards or earmarked towards infrastructure. And we have a lot of our facilities are aging and have been around for quite some time. So, we have always have long-term plans, capital plans, and, I'd say over the last year or two, there's been more money earmarked for infrastructure. So there's a lot of exciting projects underway. Who we support, it's really no different than, really any of my colleagues here, as we are a centralized supply chain office. So all of our hospitals, all of our 21 acute care facilities, our large and always growing network of ambulatory real estate services properties, and other corporate or facilities that might not fit into those two boxes that I just mentioned. So, for example, Joe just spoke about the labs, so our core lab facilities, our central sterile facility, rehab facilities, imaging centers, and other, care facilities across the health system. So that's in a nutshell what we do. And again, I think on the right-hand side there, I have a whole bunch of categories. It's all of the areas that a director of engineering within a hospital is is going to be responsible for. It's inside and outside of the building. You'll notice that we also snow removal contracts, landscaping contracts. There's paving on the outside, garage maintenance, that sort of stuff. A lot of professional services, whether it's architecture work that's going to be coming before a bigger project. Yeah, I think that's about it.
Thank you, Greg.
Sure.
So, question to your point of growth, right? Many of us on this team have been very lucky to be with this health system for quite some time, and we've seen the growth. We've been a major part of this growth. How do you make decisions again regarding, let's say, for instance, purchase services, right? We have 3 regions. Joe kind of touched on the fact that we're all the way from Riverhead to Westchester. Do you look to engage with different suppliers based on region? But how are some of the ways that a supplier should contact you, and based on what they have to offer, how would they sort of have opportunities?
Yeah, I think within the space that I'm working in, facilities and engineering, it is maybe not so much unique within broader purchase services, but maybe somewhat different than clinical supplies, in the sense that we do have a lot of vendors right here in our backyard. We do business with some major national and multinational companies, but I would say the vast majority of vendors and companies that we're doing business within facilities and engineering are right here on Long Island and Westchester County, New Jersey, New York City. And depending on what this service is, what facility is that we're talking about, we may need a vendor that is located in Westchester County. We may need a vendor that's located in Staten Island or New Jersey. We can't have a vendor that's located in Westchester or Putnam County providing snow removal services to Peconic Bay Medical Center in Riverhead. So we do like to form very strong partnerships with our local vendors right here in Greater New York. But as far as more generally speaking, the decisions regarding vendor selection and within purchase services, it's all of the same things, or all of the things that you would expect. It's also cost, it's quality of service, it's the skill set or job competency possessed by the vendor, reliability and dependability of the vendor. When we pick up the phone and call the vendor, we want to make sure they're arriving in the amount of time that we've agreed upon, and then general integrity of the vendor, and of course the vendor's willingness to agree to some of our core and important health system terms and conditions. So for example, if we're going to have a roofing contractor going up on a ladder and going up on our roof, of course insurance requirements have to be met, of course, for something like that. In most pockets of the supply chain, if not all, we have what we call value analysis teams or committees that help make decisions regarding the introduction of new products or vendors into the health system. And these committees are talking about both cost and quality. And cost is not, of course, the only driver. There has to be, a very nice mix or blend of both of those things. Within facilities and engineering, some specific pockets, I would say, are a little bit more saturated than others. But conversely, there are other areas where we seem to always be in search of new vendors, because we only have a handful, and maybe the directors of engineering at the facilities aren't happy with the service that current vendors are providing. So within facilities and engineering specifically, the Value Analysis Committee meets twice a month. This forum has representation from every hospital, as well as representation from our real estate services network. And we're constantly talking about current vendors and the need for new vendors to be introduced into, certain pockets within the facility's supply chain, depending on, whether or not our current needs are being met. So, Dawn, I hope that answers your question.
No, that was great. And one more question. So when those windows sort of open, how would prospective suppliers sort of get in contact, or do we do RFPs? What are we doing to sort of market when we are looking for new suppliers in those categories?
There are RFPs that take place, but I would also say, absent a RFP situation, I can be an introduction into the health system and the engineering folks, and I've done this before where I've brought into our value analysis meeting, basically introducing a vendor that we're not yet doing business with, and just a short presentation of what they can do for us, and the audience, all the engineering directors, are present at all of these meetings, and to the extent that there's a need and they like what they see, then we start to work with that vendor and move forward with an onboarding process.
Great, great. And we will be sharing at the end of this presentation our contact for our supplier diversity contact, as well as some additional contacts. Thanks, Greg. That was great. So we're going to move on now to Amber Patina. And Amber, if I did not pronounce that correctly, please correct me.
Patino.
Patino. Amber is our program manager for sustainability. She's going to give some insight into our sustainability goals and maybe how, again, we engage with current or new suppliers to reach those goals. So welcome, Amber.
Thank you, Dawn. Good morning, everyone. Just a brief introduction on myself. So Amber Patino, I've been on the Northwell team just shy of 1 year now, so still fairly new. My background is really in waste management, sustainability, recycling, composting. So previously I worked at New York City's Department of Sanitation for about 7 years, where I did a lot of operational work to stand up kind of waste diversion programs throughout the city. So I've been brought on to Northwell's team to really support our own recycling goals. But now I am essentially a project manager for a lot of our different sustainability subcommittees, which touch, procurement, our food and nutrition department, the operating rooms. So a little bit of everything. And the timing was actually really great because in 2022, Northwell formalized a lot of our sustainability goals and our strategy. It's not to say that we weren't focused on environmental responsibility before. This actually dates back to 2010 when Northwell signed a memorandum of understanding with the US EPA Environmental Protection Agency, where we committed to reducing our carbon footprint. So that was really kind of the first time we formally committed. But a lot has happened, in the past few years regarding climate change and goals throughout different industries. So in 2022, we joined Healthcare Without Harm's Healthcare Climate Council, which is comprised of leading healthcare systems throughout the country, really just having input on how we can, support each other towards the same goals that we all have. Very interestingly enough, in 2022, Donna Drummond, who is Northwell's Chief Expense Officer, was also named the Chief Sustainability Officer. It's a very unique position that she's in because essentially she can really leverage, our supply chain to meet these environmental goals that we now have. And then finally, June 3rd, 2022, Northwell Health signed on to the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services Healthcare Sector Pledge. And one of the goals, there's a few listed in that pledge, but one of them is committing to go net zero by the year 2050. And net zero essentially means that we are removing as much carbon as we're using throughout our entire operations. It's a pretty ambitious goal, but when you think about, the healthcare sector in the United States, it's responsible for almost 9% of all greenhouse gas emissions in this country. So, it could no longer be ignored. And when you think about us as a healthcare system, we need to be able to take care of our planet because climate change and its effects directly affects our communities, our health. So it's just very cyclical in that nature. If you go to the next slide, please. How can we get to net zero? So we have very ambitious goals. And again, I am supporting a lot of the kind of initiatives that you see here on this slide, but implementing sustainable waste management is definitely my bread and butter. It's my background. I'm diving into like electric vehicles and things like that. But when I think about, how I can deal with the supply chain and our vendors, I'm really taking a sustainability approach, right? So are these products easy to recycle? Are they comprised of recycled materials or eco-friendly materials? When we think about, our cleaning supplies, are there chemicals of concern that are directly linked to negative health outcomes? So, I'm not directly engaging our vendors. I'm actually supporting the folks who are, right? So the teams who are looking for new products, whether it's electronics, they're, EPEAT registered, or how recyclable they are. So, I take a step back and see how we can align these products with Northwell's overall sustainability goals and our mission. So 2050 seems like a long time, but definitely have to make some momentum to get there in time.
Thanks, Amber. That was great. So how would you say companies can sort of embed sustainability into their operations and remain competitive?
Yeah, that is a great question. So I'm not sure if everyone on this call is familiar with carbon emissions and scopes 1, 2, and 3. But in our commitment that we signed on to go net zero by 2050, one of the earlier goals is to calculate our scope 3 emissions by the year 2024. And very, very high level, scope 1, you can think of a company's direct emissions. So for Northwell, that would be comprised of our fleet, our ambulances, things that are directly under our control. Scope 2 emissions are still under our control, but the biggest example is the energy that we purchase. Where is that energy coming from? What are the carbon emissions associated with that? And then scope 3 is the most challenging because it is directly tied to our supply chain. Scope 3 essentially means our vendors, scope 1 plus 2 equals our scope 3. So by 2024, our supply chain has to be in a place where they can actually tell us about their own emissions. So number one, I would say sustainability is an emerging topic throughout all industries, right? So healthcare is just kind of now really opening up their eyes and saying that, there is a direct link to community health and climate change. So which is why the goals are so ambitious. But I think to stay competitive, you kind of have to start thinking about your own emissions and what that looks like throughout your own supply chain to be able to come to us and say, hey, we already know what our scopes are. Is this, what you're looking for? And then number two, I think participating in, I turned on in here, participating in programs that maybe kind of market your story. So for example, the EPA has a ton of sustainability initiatives. One of them is like smart waste shipping, right? So there's a list of freight companies and shipping companies that are committed to lower emissions. If you're actually using one of those companies, that's something to not only market, but tell us, right, when you're coming to the table. Knowing your labels, right? If you're using recycled materials or reusable items in any of your products or content, that's something that's going to become more and more important when industries are looking at their scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions. And then I think finally, just, thinking about maybe sustainability in ways that you haven't before, right? Oftentimes, you do cost saving things that are actually sustainable, but you're not telling that story. So really being able to take a step back, looking at your own operations and approaching us with that, I think will help in the long run and keep you more competitive as we start embedding sustainability in all of our own operations.
Thank you. Yes, I think that that's true. I think also one of the other things that we are beginning to sort of embark upon as part of our supply diversity initiatives here at Northwell is the social impact. So I think some suppliers you may not be able to, or you're still searching on how you're going to tell your sustainability story, but maybe your story is also social impact. And those should be some of the things that you are able to sort of, you know, provide information on what you're doing in the communities. Again, to Amber's point, we recognize that your sustainability initiatives, social impact, how you engage with minority and local suppliers all sort of have an impact on the community and the health of the communities that we serve. So thank you, Amber. That was great. I'm going to now give it over to Alfio DeFranco. He is Director of Supplier Risk Management, and he's going to give some information on, from an operations standpoint, how we engage with our suppliers, what it takes to become a supplier of Northwell, and some of the things that we have to do in terms of due diligence and supplier screening. So I'll take it away.
Thank you, Dawn. Can everybody hear me okay?
I can.
All right, just wanted to make sure. So yeah, I'm Al DeFranco. Been with Northwell almost 7 years now. Been working in a compliance-related function for the majority of my career. And you know, the vendor management team within procurement is a little bit unique because it works very closely with corporate compliance and accounts payable and legal affairs and all these different units and stakeholders, because our job is really to be the gatekeepers. We have to make sure that whatever vendors we let through the gate are vendors that are not going to present any type of reputational or operational, financial, or legal risk to Northwell. So just a quick breakdown of the metrics. On an annual basis, the last few years, we're creating about 2,500 to 3,000 vendors. That's not just entities or companies that Northwell is transacting with. That is any payee, essentially, that Northwell is paying. For instance, we have about 10% of our vendor population on an annual basis are NYPD officers that provide armed security services at our New York City hospitals, just as an example. And then we have multiple different pathways where vendors are processed and added. So some of those ads are a result of maybe a patient refund, a scholarship, a stipend, hardship assistance, whatever the case may be. But for the purposes of this audience, I think the most important thing is trying to give you guys an understanding of how seriously we take vendor risk management at Northwell. And when I say that we have a gate, right, we're the gatekeepers, it's a gate. We do open the gate more often than not. It's not an impenetrable wall. But it really starts with making sure that you have your business in order and that you're responsive. Once our team receives a vendor request, because we're in the Office of Procurement, like the category management teams, and the buyers on those teams will submit a vendor request to us, depending on if they have what's called an approved requisition, essentially an order for a product or a service. Once we get that vendor request, the first thing we're going to look at is your W-9 form. So we want to make sure your form is signed and it's clear, it's accurate, and it's up to date. I can't tell you how many times an onboarding is delayed because we are confused or have questions on the W-9 form, and we have to go back and forth with the vendor. So make sure you have a W-9 form that's presentable and you know, isn't posing any additional questions. There's also the questionnaire aspect as well. We have a vendor onboarding questionnaire that we asked all of our vendors, at least our vendors that are going to be issued a purchase order or that we're on contract with, to complete. And within that questionnaire, there's a number of different sections. There's a few attestations in regards to like COVID-19 vaccine compliance, any conflicts of interest. We're asking you to disclose if you have any employees that have a family relationship potentially with a Northwell employee. Perhaps you're owned by a PE firm or a large investment firm that potentially has an ownership stake in a vendor that we're already doing business with. So we do work closely with corporate compliance to clear those conflicts of interest from a regulatory perspective. There's a number of regulatory and legal and financial screenings that take place. We're going to want to verify your business. We're going to check to see whether or not you're registered with the Secretary of State, in whether it's New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, nationally, internationally. Majority of our vendors, though, are the tri-state area. We're going to make sure that you're not on any government watch list, whether that's exclusions, being debarred from participating in Medicare or Medicaid, any federal programs, or also the OFAC list, right? Making sure that you're not a sanctioned individual or entity. So that the regulatory checks are rather routine and rudimentary. Where we dive a lot deeper and where I think our program is really unique is we go further with negative news and adverse findings. So we have some tools that we're able to use that provide advanced capabilities for us to scrub the web and to identify any type of articles or pieces of media that may present some sort of reputational risk to Northwell. And the purpose of that is essentially to keep us off the front page of Newsday for, something that could potentially harm our reputation. We're the largest employer in the state of New York, so reputational risk is serious. It's a serious consideration for us. So yeah, I think that gives you a good overview on the onboarding and the screening. The background checks, like I mentioned, they are rather extensive. There is an extensive vetting process that goes on, but more often than not, vendors are allowed through the gate. There is an ongoing monitoring portion of this or aspect of this as well, where we continuously look at our vendors for any type of red flags or alerts, whether that's the adverse media that we mentioned before, or showing up on a government watch list, or there being some sort of criminal proceeding against you or your company. That's something we would look at. With the questionnaire, I think the thing that sticks out to me with some of our vendors is they tend to drag their feet or they punt. Maybe we're sending the questionnaire to a recipient who's not necessarily the correct person. But the longer that the questionnaire takes to get completed, the more it's going to delay the onboarding. So being responsive, having your business in order, having all of your documents ready. If there are any adverse findings that we're going to be able to identify, making sure you have additional information or documentation up front. That way, when we ask for it, it's not going to take too long for you to get it back to us. I think that would be helpful as well. And then, if you guys have any questions later on, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you, Al. That was great. I was going to ask you, what should a supplier do to be prepared to be approved as a vendor at Northwell? I'm not sure if there's more you can add. You kind of have already given that information, but is there anything you would add to that?
The other thing I would add is just your email address. Make sure that you're providing us with an email address that is working and active. Don't give us your AOL email address from 15 years ago, because more than likely when we send that questionnaire, you're either not going to receive it, or it's going to get blocked, or it's going to get caught up in some sort of junk or spam filter. So making sure you have an active and current email address, a W-9 that doesn't leave a lot of questions for us to ask, that is signed, that is dated, that is clear and appropriately filled out, and just being responsive overall.
Thank you. And I'll add, just based on, operations, I think it's important as a potential supplier or a new supplier to also ask questions yourself, right? You want to become a supplier of Northwell Health and we want to approve you, but you should fully understand what that means. What are our payment terms? Can you negotiate the payment terms? What should you expect in terms of payment? If you guys have requirements for credit to be extended, et cetera, how does that, work with Northwell's requirements? I think those are some of the things that I see after the fact. I think it's important as a supplier that you fully understand to whom you're doing business with and how their operations are up front before you provide a good or a service. Oftentimes, we have suppliers that wait until after they've already sort of engaged to ask those questions, and I think you should know that up front. So that would be some advice that I would give to potential suppliers. So Thank you to all of the panelists for presenting. We'd like to open it up now for questions from the audience. Colin, should I leave that up to you guys?
Sure. If you want to, that's totally fine. Just so you all are aware, we will scroll through, or I will scroll through the chat to look for the questions that were asked previously that may not have been addressed, but I will also be addressing questions from the Q&A, and I'll probably do those first because they're just easier to track. That being said, I'll start with a question from Mark Panton. Mark asks, do you handle laboratory renovations or expansions, or is this a CAPEX budget team? What about items like casework, fume hoods, biosafety cabinets? What about surgical operating room build-outs, stainless steel tables, etc.? That's very specific. Wow.
Joe, is Joe still on? Can you answer that question?
Hi. Yes. So that's an interesting question because we get that a lot. Stainless steel tables and let's just say, for lack of a better term, capital items that aren't necessarily equipment. The lab does, we do get involved in that procurement. So the answer to that question is yes. As far as like lab renovations and fit outs, that's a bit more complicated because sometimes that's dependent on the equipment that's coming in. So sometimes it is a necessary aspect of it, and but it's kind of like it goes in conjunction with the equipment that's coming in. So if a wall needs to be removed and a countertop needs to be either lengthened or shortened or the height adjusted, it's dependent on the equipment that's coming in. So it's usually, it is something that we handle, but we don't get too involved in that from the procurement side. And it should be noted that the core lab was recently renovated and construction was completed or finalized. I think the go live was 2019. So it's still relatively new. So the actual construction that the labs are undergoing is relatively minimal now.
Okay, and I'm just gonna add on to that because I just saw a question come in here. Is it the same for centrifuges?
Centrifuges? It's the same. Yep, same answer. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. If there's
All right.
someone that has, if I'm assuming that there's someone that either distributes them or manufactures them, if they want to drop their information in the chat, I'll take it down, and we'll certainly consider it. Or maybe there's some marketing materials we could reach out to, and we'll review it.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Second question comes from Deepak Advani, and this one goes specifically to Gregory. He says, "Hi, Gregory. Are there opportunities for IT MSPs to support the labs and facilities management, to support computer hardware, software, security, and help desk services?"
Yeah, so that is, I'm not going to be able to speak to this one too much. That IT, the health system does have a separate IT department, and the folks within our supply chain and procurement department that are involved in IT, unfortunately, we don't have anyone on this line right now, but that's something that we can take back to the folks within our department.
Okay. And so I'll add to that this question from Reshmi asking whether you're looking to add any new IT diverse vendors this year, and if you're open to locally certified or regionally certified MBEs only.
I think I'll take that. I think we are always potentially open, and that is both local and regional. I did put in the chat our email address, supplierdiversity@northwell.edu. Although they're not represented on this meeting today, we certainly have representation from our IT team on our Supplier Diversity Council. And so we will share that information. And hopefully, Colin, will have another one of these discussions where we'll bring in some of our other categories.
Absolutely. I am looking forward to that. Let's see here, and I'm trying to go through them as quickly as possible, not to ask the same question. John Leteri says, as a VoIP telecom provider and IT cybersecurity company, which department persons would I reach out to for opportunities?
Again, you can send your information to supplierdiversity@northwell.edu and it will be shared with the appropriate departments.
Okay. All right, so now I'm going to try to get through as many as possible the questions from the chat because they have been coming through fast and furious. So let's see here. This is from, well, no, Mark asked this one already. Deepak, we got that one already. Ramki Sankar, just curious, does this webinar cover, or do you guys, I guess, look into CPAs, accountant services, or is it only technical based? So are you looking to procure services from CPAs and other sort of professional services, or is it just for the most part right now technically based?
So again, we certainly do look for professional services. We engage with those types of companies. We don't have anyone, I'm sorry, on the supply chain team that represents those categories today. But I would urge you to send your information to supplierdiversity@northwell.edu and we can forward to the appropriate individual.
Okay, thank you. Millie Becker is a real estate broker in Westchester County, and her question is, do you support real estate procurements for new healthcare facilities?
I'm sorry, repeat that, Colin.
Do you support real estate procurements for new healthcare facilities?
I'm not sure I fully understand, but I believe, Millie, you and I have met before. If you want to take yourself off mute, maybe you can ask that question again, or I'll try to answer. Okay. I believe I've met with Millie and I have shared your information with our real estate team.
Okay. Another quick question here. What items are you recycling currently from the lab and research departments?
I answered that one in the chat, but typically what we recycle is paper, plastics, metals, and currently interested in expanding clinical plastic recycling.
Gotcha. Thank you so much. And I do see your response, so sorry about that. Let's see here. Enrique Urquiola. Enrique says, I'm with Alamo Insurance Group, a minority insurance broker with 25 years experience in employee benefits, risk management, consulting. Does your procurement team manage the vendor selection process for professional services such as insurance brokers, or do we go directly to human resources for employee benefits and workers' comp and or central risk management department for PC related policies?
So I would say we don't directly manage the vetting process or selection process. It is handled by the business. What we do in this office is once the need has been identified and a vendor has been selected, we then work on any contracting terms and conditions, et cetera. So yes, we would typically advise someone who wants to provide those type of services to reach out to those teams directly and or through our supply diversity initiatives or general vendor initiatives, we can refer as well.
Excellent. And a follow-up, once one is registered through the Supplier One IO site, will we be notified of any relevant RFPs, or is there a way for us to follow through on potential opportunities?
Yes. We utilize that list when we are contacted from the organization, within the organization, for potential suppliers. And if there's a need and there's a match, we would be reaching out to you directly.
Excellent. Tom Regalado, I hope I pronounced that correct. Tomas?
You did.
Excellent. Go ahead, ask your question.
Good morning to all. My name is Tomas Regalado. I am the Vice President of Corporate as well as Government and Senior Advisor to the President for Spanish Broadcasting System. SBS is the only minority NMSDC certified media company in the United States. And in New York, we have the #1 radio station in general market across any language, any levels, which is La Mega, and the #3 radio station. And I'm looking at what is called the Miller-Kaplan, which is says which is the advertising that you all spend regarding to get your word out regarding the hospitals. And everything from Group M to Austin Williams again, and Horizon Media. And when we're the only minority certified NMSDC, we're the #1 radio station in general market, #3 radio station in general market across every platform, we're only seeing a 5.9% of the buys that you all have. So, I mean, I look at that and I'm saying, okay, so, and please forgive me for why I say this, but where is the diversity in that one?
So I would first say perhaps it's coming through on a tier 2. I know that many of the organizations that we work with do sub out. And as a matter of fact, that's one of the things that we try to work very closely with our prime suppliers to do to make sure that they're subbing and reporting. That said, I would say, Tom, reach out to me directly, and we can have a conversation. We would those agreements are really initiated within our marketing team. And I think perhaps, you guys need to be connected to someone in marketing.
I would love to, because I looked at the last buy and you guys had a $1.78 million ad buy. And of that, we only got 93,000. And we're the #1 radio station in general markets and radio and TV and NMSDC, the only minority. So diversity is. So how can I reach out to you directly, ma'am, if you mind me asking?
You can email me, and I'll have Colin send you my email, my direct email.
Greatly appreciated. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
So Tomas, you can take my email address, and this is for everyone here. It's C as in cat, A as in apple, L as in Larry, U as in uncle, M as in Mary at nynjmsdc.org. Feel free to email me, and I'll put you guys in touch.
At
nynjmsdc.org. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
You're welcome. And as a follow-up to that, Jason Pierre is asking of you directly, Alfio, what is your process, or is there even a screening process for creative service suppliers?
No, I wouldn't say there's any specific process for suppliers that are providing, creative services, whether that's media, visual production, audio production. It's pretty much the same. Where it tends to change is if our supplier is going to have access to protected health information, then it's a little bit more rigorous. But other than that, it's making sure, like I said before, that you have all of your documents in order, and that you're able to pass through our various screening and background checks. And again, like Don mentioned before, our team is not responsible for the vendor selection process. So once a request comes to us for a supplier providing creative services, that's when we would begin our vetting and due diligence.
And so I assume that the answer would probably be the same for this next question, again from Jason, and he was asking how likely are you to seek a new supplier to help/show your sustainability story through video?
I think Amber can answer that question, but prior to that, let me just jump in for the last question. given the size of our organization, typically our business lines are the decision makings, right? Decision makers in terms of the suppliers that they want to use. They sort of, for lack of a better word, words are shopping, right, for their products and their services. Once they sort of identify a supplier that they believe would be able to provide the product and or service that they're looking for, that is when this office becomes involved in terms of negotiating conditions, legalities, as well as pricing. And so I think for those of you on the meeting today, the goal really is going to be to create connections, right? And, you know, you'll hear, I've said this on multiple occasions, you know, Terrence, the president of the New York, New Jersey chapter says this on multiple occasions. And that is why we engage and we have events like we do today, why we, you know, I was at the BOE event, so that we can help to create those connections. And so I would encourage everyone to email supplierdiversity@northwell.edu. Reach out to me. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm very active. I have had many people reach out to me on that platform, and I've been able to connect with not only business leaders and decision makers at Northwell Health, but other organizations as well. You know, although my background is supply chain operations and I've been with Northwell Health for 20 years in that capacity, it's really a dual role in also leading and helping to grow supplier diversity. Now, that is for Northwell Health, but for me, it is, you know, a personal endeavor. And so I help in any way I can, whether it's with this organization or other organizations. So I think to answer just back to that question, how are those decisions made? It's about having a product or service that someone needs, connecting with the right person, and then being able to, you know, sort of present what it is that you have to offer. And once those connections are made and you have those opportunities, then we go through sort of the operation side with Al's team of actually becoming an approved vendor. So I hope that answers that question, and I'll hand it off to Amber to answer the sustainability. I hope you still remember the question, Amber. I apologize.
It's okay. I think I got to it in the chat too, but I think just echoing Dawn, if we need a promo or item or a video, you know, we're doing our own research, but we might go back to Dawn and say, hey, do you have a list of suppliers, diverse suppliers that we might want to engage? So I would say if you have a portfolio to share, you know, please reach out, email me. I think we're still pretty early on in the sustainability journey, but, you know, those things are going to become more crucial as we expand and grow.
Okay, thank you. And I'm going to keep going through the questions. I'm realizing that folks are answering the questions in the chat as well. So it's like sometimes I'm asking the question again, so I apologize. Joe says, can you direct me to the person that manages the marketing, print, signage, and promo category?
Yes, please email supplier diversity and we certainly will.
Okay. Okay, so Thomas, I think we answered your question, so I'll go past that. Thank you. Excellent. Hi, Jason. I'm sorry, Kim. I guess I did skip your question. Kim Kwakaram says, we provide background screening services. We're interested in learning more about providing pre-employment background screening for your new hires. We are also interested in learning about how we might be able to help you vet your vendors as is being discussed right now. So Kim, I'm not sure what the question is. Are you sort of asking how we can do that or how Northwell can do that?
I think so. That question is twofold. And so the first question was regarding background checks. I do think that we recently entered into an agreement for those services, although I would like to sort of highlight just as an organization how we are really working with the suppliers that we currently work with to make sure that they are subbing out to diverse and local suppliers. So there's opportunity there, and I would encourage you to reach out to me to learn more about that. I think the answer to your next question, and Al can speak to it as well, is that we recently did sign an agreement for our vendor risk management services. So we may not be in the market for that now, but I'll let Al sort of speak to that.
Yeah, previously we had a number of different vendors that were providing different services or tools that we were using for due diligence and as part of the vetting process. But last year we did enter into a long-term agreement with a leading third-party risk provider. But that being said, we are always open to looking at new solutions, new platforms. We take third-party risk seriously. So we're passionate about it, at least I am. So if you want to be able to get in touch with me and show me what your offering is, we'd be more than willing to take a look at it and see if it can, add value to our program.
And I can add to that. It's Jessica Olfing. So the framework with which we contract is under a group purchasing organization. So while there might not be a direct fit for Northwell, there could be a need for non-Northwell entities. I think everyone on the phone is doing the right thing by participating in these types of events. And I think even, the outreach via email and just continued networking and participation in these types of forums is key. It might not happen today, it might not happen in 6 months, but continuing the networking, right? So that then when the opportunity does present, that the fit can be made, right? And it's up to the organizations on this call also to put yourself out there. And this is obviously this is a great this is a great forum, and we thank everyone for their participation, but it has to be continuous. I think I just want to drive that message. Even Tomas, I think it sounds like you have some success in penetrating Northwell. So I would, we will make the connections as best we can, but it's also up to the organizations to drive, to make sure that the fit is there and continue the outreach. We're like we mentioned before, we are like a city. There's no services that you could ever, I don't even think there's any services that exist that we haven't needed at one point in time. We have people feeding fish, watering plants. We have, very sophisticated services. We have very local services. It's very diverse with respect to the need to support the organization, and we definitely appreciate everyone's participation today. And thanks for letting us participate also.
Thank you so much, Jessica. That's very well said, and something that Terry says all the time. And I've even sort of taken on that mantle of helping MBEs and others to understand that sometimes, a contract doesn't come in 6 months. Sometimes a contract doesn't come in a year. Sometimes a contract doesn't come until 2 years. It's definitely about building the relationship, because the service has to meet the need. And if the need isn't there, there isn't a need for the service. If the service isn't there when the need is, it's just a hunt for the right MBE. So a lot of things have to happen at the same time for it to be a harmonious, synchronous relationship. And so don't ever forget that. It doesn't mean don't give up. It doesn't mean don't ask, but it does sometimes mean, more than anything else, relationships and patience. So moving on, because I want to try to get all the questions in the next 20 minutes or so. Ty Cobb says, I think you mentioned, or you said, that your goal is to get to 10% spend. The question is, where are you now?
We are very close. We are just under 10%.
Okay. Let's see here. So Ryan Kelly, well, let me say I did see Herman's comment, so thank you, Herman. But I'll just move on to the next question. Ryan Kelly says, "Hi, my name is Ryan Kelly from Hindsight. We are an artificial intelligence company that works to make workflows much more efficient for providers and payers too. Where would you recommend the best place to reach out to become a software provider of Northwell? Should I do the supply diversity email address, or would you recommend another email as well? And thank you for a wonderful event, by the way."
Thank you. I would supplier diversity email address. And we will share your information. I would also say, make sure you register on the portal.
Okay, Tanya Paris says, "Are you, or can you share, I guess, a comprehensive list of professional vendor services that are outsourced to supply diversity vendors, and can we put ourselves out there?"
Repeat that question, Colin. I apologize.
I'll state my question because I'm the one who asked. What I was attempting to type was, are you able to share a comprehensive list of professional vendor services that are outsourced to supplier diversity vendors? And yes, we will put ourselves out there, which is what I've heard on this call several times. So absolutely happy to do that. Would be great to receive a comprehensive list of professional services that are allowed, if that is a possibility.
So we don't have a list. Again, to Jessica's point, there really isn't anything that we have not engaged in purchasing. And so I would, there's a need potentially for most services. We just would have to find where the need is and where an organization can fit.
Okay, and is there a particular format or template that you require in terms of putting ourselves out there and sending the email, or?
Well, if you register on the link will ask you all of the appropriate questions.
Got it. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Event.
All right, and so I just put my email address in the chat. And Raza, since I am now transitioning to hands that are raised, I will let you go first. Please note that I won't ask or address any more questions from the chat, just in the interest of time. So just for the hands raised, and we'll go through those, and then we'll be done for today. So Raza, please go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me? Yes, so I just want to say it's amazing, great NMSDC and Northwell. And Don, finally, good to see you. I know I've reached out multiple times and we've kind of missed each other and so forth. It's amazing. And I just wanted to focus more on, obviously, currently we were in Europe and everybody is gearing towards sustainability. And so I took Amber's email address and I will touch base with her. And just to let you know that obviously Northwell is expanding so much, and we could be part of that where we can actually help and assist, because it's it's very difficult and people use that term very loosely, those who kind of don't, and it's still work in progress. Because the key thing is that it's not just a question of using the sustainable material or recycled material. After, let's say, it's used, what happens to it? If it's just garbage regularly, then it's not a full cycle. So there's so much that we're all learning together. And I think Visual City can be very instrumental with Northwell when they're expanding and taking over so many other satellite locations. We can definitely work together. And all I would love to do is that if we're given a level playing field, I think we can work hand in hand. And I appreciate, and Dawn, sorry, I know I've been kind of constantly tried to get in touch with you, but finally here we are, and I appreciate it. And hopefully we'll move the needle. And Amber, thank you very much. And I think we could talk more because we are kind of gung-ho about sustainability at the moment. Thank you, Colin.
Looking forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you. Last question for today is coming from Mona Lisa. Mona Lisa, your hand was raised, so please unmute and ask your question.
Yes, I'll be quick. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So I wanted to know, is there like a limit to how many vendors of a certain category you take on? So my company, we specialize in textiles. So like the curtains, pillowcases, sheets, pretty much anything like that, towels, whatever. But like, of course, I would, you guys said the link, and then there's like I can send the email. But I was just curious if there's like certain vendors that already have a contract, or you contracted out with them for like X amount of years. Um, like, how does that work? Is it like a waiting period or something?
That's a great question. So the answer to, is there a limit on the number of vendors that we can have in any specific category, is no. And I think every one of the suppliers who are in our area, and other minority suppliers, the great thing about this organization, right, is the growth, right? We've scaled tremendously. I'm sorry, we've grown tremendously over the last 20 years. And so opportunity in some ways abound. But also, you're right, we do have agreements. We do enter into multi-year agreements. And ultimately, we have to, look at cost and quality, et cetera. So back to Jessica's point, and I say this often, right? I would never give up. I would certainly make connections. I would certainly send your information, because you never know when the need may arise, or maybe there's a need now. We have such a large service area, even when we have these multi-year larger agreements with larger organizations. There's always, one organization sometimes just can't do it on their own, right? And so they're subbing out to other organizations. So I think it's important that you understand that, and you sort of know the landscape. And that's how we'll be able to make those connections where we could potentially find, opportunities for suppliers such as yourself, smaller suppliers. So please reach out.
Well, thank you, Dawn. My name is Mona Lisa, and I will be reaching out to you on LinkedIn. I'll, do everything with the links and the emails. And thank you, guys.
I'll be looking forward to it, Mona Lisa.
All right, well, thank you all so much for your questions. Dawn, I just want to give it to you for final remarks if you have any, and then I'll close out.
I just want to, Colin, thank the council for allowing us to do this today. Thank you to all the participants. It was great questions. And thank you to all of my colleagues at Northwell Health who agreed to join and help sort of spread not only our mission of our goals to increase the number of small businesses, minority-owned businesses, and local-owned businesses that we work with, but also just, again, the reason for why we do it. We are a healthcare organization. We are committed to increasing the health of our communities, and sustainability is really important because we know that all of those things tie back in to health equity, financial equity, et cetera. So thank you, everyone, and we look forward to doing more of these, and hopefully we'll be able to bring back other categories as well.
Thank you, Dawn. And again, on behalf of the council, thank you to the full Northwell team for being here today. It's not oftentimes that you get actually category managers to be on some of these calls so that you can hear from them directly. So we appreciate that. I'm pretty sure that the MBEs appreciate it as well, having the opportunity to speak with you all directly. Alfio, I see you have your hand up, Alfio. You want to make a comment before we close out?
Yes, thank you, Dawn, for allowing me to participate, and thank you to everybody. We look forward to meeting with you in the future.
Excellent. So again, on behalf of the council, we thank you all for being here. Please note that this recording will be shared on our YouTube channel. Follow us on all of the social media platforms. We're on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. Go to our website if you're looking for any additional information. Please feel free to share our information with any MBEs you know that may not be certified. We're always happy and welcome to bring more folks in. And so we will have a few more of these in the coming weeks. I know we have one coming up with City next month, and then we have quite a few events prepared specially for our MBEs in the next coming weeks. I do want to especially highlight that this year is the Council's 50th anniversary. And so on August 10th, we will be having a party of sorts celebrating the Council's 50 years of existence and 50 years of service to minority businesses through and through. We will be doing a boat ride, or as I like to say, a summer evening cruise on the Hudson on August 10th. So please look out in your newsletters and also on our website for more information about that. And that information will go out within the next week. And so without further ado, right at 11:29, I'm so excited that we finished on time. Thank you all, and you can enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, Colin. Thank you, Don. Thank
Great
you all.
job.
Have a good day, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Good day.
Thank
Bye.
you all. Great job, NMSDC and Northwell.